The husband hid the best friend's wedding invitation, ashamed of the wife he considered sloppy. But when she arrived stunning at the party, she left everyone in shock, including him. The reflection in the bedroom mirror was that of a stranger. Rachel blinked once, twice, as if the simple act could realign the image and bring back the woman she once knew. But the figure staring back remained the same, a faded version of herself, with dark circles that told tales of sleepless nights and an expression of exhaustion that seemed etched into her skin. Her hair, once styled in a sleek bob, was now pulled into a loose, careless bun. She wore a faded grey sweatshirt and matching pants, her go-to outfit within the walls of their suburban Seattle home. It was practical, comfortable, and above all, invisible, just like she felt. Rachel stepped closer to the mirror, her heart heavy. Where was the woman who not so long ago commanded boardrooms on the 42nd floor of a downtown skyscraper? The professional in tailored blazers, stilettos that clicked with authority down marble hallways, and a schedule as packed as her ambition. She remembered the rush of closing a major deal, the thrill of leading her team, the respect in her colleagues' eyes. That was a vibrant life, a career that didn't just define her, it was her. Rachel, the senior project manager, the expert in market expansion, a force to be reckoned with. Everything changed for love, or what she thought was love. When David, her husband, came to her with stars in his eyes and a business plan tucked under his arm, she didn't hesitate. He wanted to start his own tech consulting firm, his lifelong dream, and she, swept up in passion and the promise of building something together, dove in head first. "I need you, babe," he'd said, gripping her hands. "You're the smartest, most organized person I know. I can't do this without you." And she believed him. She traded her corporate badge, her six-figure salary, her annual bonuses, and the admiration of her team for the promise of a shared future, a legacy they'd build together. In the beginning, it felt worth it. Their cozy Capitol Hill home became the headquarters of their fledgling company. The dining room table turned into mission control, covered in spreadsheets, invoices, and client lists. While David was the charming face of the business, winning over investors and clients at power lunches and networking events, Rachel was the silent engine, keeping everything running behind the scenes. She managed the finances, reviewed every contract, ensured deadlines were met, and kept the bureaucracy from swallowing their dream. She was the first to wake and the last to sleep, fueled by coffee and the hope that her sacrifices would be acknowledged. And in a way they were. Their company took off. Within 2 years, what started at their dining table occupied an entire floor in a sleek office building in downtown Seattle. David shone. He gave interviews to tech magazines, appeared on podcasts, and was invited to speak at industry conferences. He was the visionary, the successful entrepreneur. And Rachel remained in the shadows. But now, those shadows weren't the thrilling war room of a rising startup. They were the loneliness of her own home. Her presence at the company became less critical as they hired staff to take over the roles she once juggled. David called it giving her a break, but it didn't feel like rest. It felt like erasure, slow and steady. He came home later and later smelling of expensive cologne and the craft cocktails from the trendy bars where he closed deals. He brought with him the energy of the outside world, a world she no longer belonged to. Their conversations, once filled with shared dreams and plans, became his monologues about his victories, his challenges, his high-profile connections. She listened, nodded, offered advice when asked, but felt more and more like a piece of furniture, a spectator in the life she'd helped build. Gradually, she stopped dressing up. Why bother? She spent her days at home, managing the household logistics, so he could shine without a care. The old sweats were practical. The messy bun didn't get in the way. Her bare face wouldn't smudge the pillow if she dozed off on the couch, waiting for him. She lost herself. Lost in the household budget, the grocery runs, the scheduling of his social calendar. Lost to the point that, staring at her reflection now, she felt a pang of disillusionment so deep it physically hurt. That woman in the mirror wasn't weak. She knew that. There was immense strength in everything she'd done, but it was an invisible strength propping up someone else's spotlight while her own light dimmed. A noise at the front door snapped her out of her trance. It was David, home earlier than usual. She quickly adjusted her sweatshirt, as if trying to hide the evidence of her own neglect. He strode into the bedroom, tossing his leather briefcase onto the armchair. He looked impeccable, as always, in his navy suit. He barely glanced at her. "Exhausted," he muttered, loosening his tie. Today was brutal. Rachel nodded, her heart still heavy from the mirror's truth. She wanted to scream, to ask if he still saw her, if he remembered the woman he married. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, her eyes caught something odd. On top of the briefcase there was a thick envelope, elegant ivory paper with ornate calligraphy. It looked like an invitation he hadn't mentioned. A seed of suspicion sprouted amidst her disillusionment, a nagging feeling that the mirror wasn't the only thing hiding a painful truth. And that truth, she sensed, was about to shatter what little remained of her world. The envelope sat on the briefcase, a stark rectangle of luxury in the dim bedroom. David kept undressing, oblivious to Rachel's fixed gaze. He rambled about a client meeting, a tough negotiation, but his words were just background noise. Her focus was entirely on that invitation. It wasn't just any envelope, the quality of the paper, the elegant script. It screamed importance. A wedding, perhaps. She waited for him to mention it, to say something like, "Oh, I forgot. We got an invite." But his silence on the matter was louder than any words. David headed to the bathroom, and the sound of the shower turning on was her cue. Heart beating faster, Rachel approached the armchair. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the envelope. It was heavy, luxurious. The front read, "Mr. David Thompson and spouse." A cold jolt ran down her spine. Careful not to make a sound, she slid the card out. The gold-embossed words confirmed her suspicion. "James and Natalie invite you to celebrate their marriage. James, David's childhood best friend, their best man at their own wedding. A man she'd known for years, whose fiancée Natalie had become a close friend. Why hadn't David said anything? Why hadn't she been told? The date was 2 weeks away, an event this big, involving his closest friend, and David hadn't breathed a word. She slipped the invitation back into the envelope, placing it exactly as she'd found it, and stepped back to her side of the bed. Her mind raced, searching for a logical explanation. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he'd mention it later. But the timing felt off. Why would an invitation for such a significant event arrive so close to the date? The disillusionment from the mirror now mingled with a new, bitter feeling. Suspicion. When David emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, hair damp, she tried to keep her voice steady. "How was your day, really?" she asked, the question laced with a weight he didn't seem to notice. "Tough, like I said," he replied, opening the closet. "Just a lot to deal with." "Run into anyone interesting, any news?" she pressed, circling the topic like a predator. "Nah, same old." "Why the third degree, Rachel?" He glanced at her through the closet mirror, a hint of impatience in his expression. "Now or never?" "I talked to Natalie today," she lied, her heart pounding. "She mentioned the wedding. I'm so happy for them. Weird we haven't gotten the invite yet, don't you think? With the date so close." David's posture shifted instantly. His shoulders stiffened. He stopped rummaging through the closet and turned slowly to face her. His face, once indifferent, was now a mask of discomfort. "Oh, that," he said, his voice a shade lower. "I was going to tell you." "Tell me when, David? After the party?" Her voice came out sharper than intended. "The invitation's here, isn't it? I saw it in your briefcase." He looked away, unable to hold her gaze. That single gesture was a confession. The truth hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. "Rachel, listen." "No, I'm not listening." She cut him off, standing from the bed. The calm she'd tried to maintain crumbled, giving way to sharp pain. "Why would you hide this from me? It's James, your best friend. What's going on?" David ran a hand over his face, a heavy sigh escaping. He finally met her eyes, and what she saw broke her into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't guilt or remorse, it was irritation, justification. "I hid the invitation," he admitted, his voice cold as steel. "I hid it because I didn't want you to go." The words hit like a slap. The air fled her lungs. Didn't want me to go? Why? What did I do? He scanned her from head to toe, the grey sweats, the messy hair, the bare face. His gaze was clinical, cruel, like he was appraising a flawed object. "Look at yourself, Rachel," he said, his voice dripping with a disdain she'd never heard before. "You've let yourself go. You're frumpy, dull. You think I'm proud to show you off in public like this?" Each word was a dagger. Frumpy, dull. The woman who gave up her career to build his dream, the woman who worked silently so he could shine. "All my friends, my business contacts, they'll be there," he went on, his cruelty sharpening. "They'll be with their wives. Gorgeous, elegant, stunning women. And you? You spend your days in pajamas, you've gained weight, you don't bother with your hair, you don't care about your appearance. I'd be embarrassed, Rachel, embarrassed to walk in with you." Tears she'd been holding back spilled over, hot and silent down her cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but of a rage and humiliation so deep it choked her. The woman in the mirror, the faded figure she'd seen earlier, was the one he described with such contempt. But he didn't see the sacrifice behind that image. He didn't see the love, the dedication, the sleepless nights. He saw only the surface, the worn packaging of something he no longer valued. She stared at the man she loved, the man she'd given years of her life to, and for the first time didn't recognize him. This wasn't the David she fell for. This was a stranger, her executioner wielding words as weapons, and in the midst of that devastating pain, a spark of defiance ignited. An ember she thought had gone out. He didn't want her there. He was ashamed of her. Fine. He was about to find out what the frumpy and dull woman was capable of. Her tears dried, replaced by a mask of cold determination. The pain was still there, a gaping wound in her chest, but beneath it something stronger pulsed. It was the memory of the woman she used to be, the one who wouldn't accept being diminished, especially not by the man who should have cherished her. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, a sharp gesture, and lifted her chin, meeting David's gaze head-on. "I'm going to that wedding," she said, her voice steady, without a trace of the hurt. Each syllable was a declaration of war. "Natalie's been my friend for years. I was there when she and James met. I'm not missing their happiness because of your cruelty." David seemed genuinely taken aback by her defiance. Maybe he expected her to shrink, to cry in the bedroom and accept his humiliating verdict. The spark in her eyes disarmed him for a moment, but his expression quickly hardened, shifting to a mask of control. He stepped closer, invading her space, using his presence to intimidate. "You don't get it, Rachel," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "I don't want you there. You'll embarrass me." "That's your problem, not mine," she shot back, refusing to back down. "Your shame doesn't get to dictate my life. I'm going." A cruel, mocking smile curled David's lips. He realized intimidation wouldn't work, so he switched to a sharper cruelty. He looked at her like he was granting a favor to a stubborn child, a favor with a steep price. "Fine," he said, his tone falsely generous. "You want to go? Go. But on my terms." He paused, savoring the moment, ensuring each word cut deep. "First, you arrive after me. I don't want anyone seeing us walk in together. Second, inside, you don't know me. Sit at a different table, talk to other people. Act like we're barely acquaintances. Better yet, pretend you don't know me at all." The condition landed like a sentence. It was a calculated humiliation, designed not just to distance her, but to erase her existence as his wife, his partner. He didn't just want her invisible, he wanted her to be a stranger. He was likely already eyeing another woman who'd be at the event. Every fiber of her being screamed to reject it, to throw the truth in his face and end it right there. Her heart felt like it was shattering, the pain physical, searing. But then, amid the wreckage of her pride, a piercing clarity emerged. She looked at David, the man who saw her as a defective accessory, and his image overlaid with another in her mind. Herself years ago, confident, vibrant, owning her own light. She remembered the thrill of dressing up for an event, the feel of a perfectly fitted dress, the sound of her heels on marble. She remembered how powerful, desired, alive she felt. How had she let that woman vanish? How had she reached the point where the man she sacrificed her career and identity for felt entitled to impose such a degrading condition. The answer was simple and painful. She'd poured so much into their shared business, into him, that she forgot to pour into herself. She'd become a foundation, strong and essential, but buried beneath the structure he flaunted with pride. And in that moment, David's humiliating condition stopped being an insult and became a catalyst. Accepting it wouldn't be submission to him. It would be a silent rebellion. It would be her chance to attend that wedding, not as David's wife, but as Rachel. Just Rachel. The woman he thought he'd erased. She met his gaze, her eyes clear, her decision made. The pain was still there, but now it was fuel. "Fine, David," she said, her voice calm, almost indifferent, unsettling him more than any shout would have. "If that's what you want, that's what you'll get. I'll arrive later, and don't worry, you won't have to bother acknowledging me." She accepted, not for his approval because she knew she'd never have or want it again. She accepted because something fundamental inside her had woken from a long hibernation. That night, that hidden invitation, that cruel condition, they weren't the end. They were the beginning. She wouldn't be erased again. She'd make sure she was seen, and he, the man who wanted to pretend he didn't know her, would be forced to watch. The moment David left for work the next morning, barely exchanging a word with her, Rachel grabbed her phone. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with the adrenaline of her decision. She dialed Jessica, her college friend, the rock she could always lean on. She put the call on speaker, and before Jessica could say hello, conferenced in Megan, the other pillar of their unbreakable trio. "I need you both," was all Rachel could manage, her voice breaking as the dam of control finally burst. Through sobs of anger and humiliation, she spilled everything. The hidden invitation, David's cruel words, his degrading condition. On the other end, the initial silence gave way to protective fury. "That jerk!" Megan's voice, always the most fiery, boomed like thunder. "Who does he think he is?" "Rachel, honey, breathe," Jessica said, ever the calm one. "We've got you. And of course we're going to that wedding. Natalie's our friend too. But most importantly, we're going with you. And that man will regret every word he dared to say." Their promise was a balm. In that moment, Rachel wasn't alone in her pain anymore. She had an army. The next 2 weeks were a covert operation of personal reclamation. To the world, and especially to David, nothing had changed. At home, Rachel kept her invisibility uniform, the worn sweats, the messy bun, the glasses hiding the growing determination in her eyes. Their apartment became a silent battlefield. They barely spoke. The first night after their fight, she took her pillow and blanket and moved to the guest room. The closed door was a physical barrier mirroring the emotional chasm between them. She heard him come home late, sometimes stumbling over furniture, the smell of whiskey lingering in the hallway. He was clearly enjoying the single life he seemed to crave, despite still being married. A dull ache hit her in those moments, but she channeled it. The first thing she did was stop working for their company. The audit reports, the financial spreadsheets she still managed out of habit and a warped sense of duty. She let them go. If she was invisible and unwanted, her work would be too. Let him figure it out, or hire someone he trusted. While David saw the same faded woman at home, a meticulous transformation was underway outside. Rachel started a strict diet, not to please him, but to feel good in her own skin. She cut out sugar, alcohol and processed foods, focusing on meals that energized and slimmed her. She began morning jogs along the waterfront, feeling the Puget Sound breeze on her face and her blood pumping with purpose. She booked lymphatic drainage sessions, a deep facial that stripped away more than impurities. It felt like shedding layers of neglect. She went to a salon for a nourishing hair treatment, but asked to leave with her hair tied back to avoid suspicion. Each small act was a brick in rebuilding herself. The day of the wedding arrived. David left early, flawless in his tuxedo, without so much as glancing at the guest room. As soon as his car pulled out of the garage, Rachel felt a surge of freedom. It was D-Day. She didn't get ready at home. The battlefield wasn't the place for a coronation. The rendezvous was Jessica's Belltown loft, already transformed into a professional dressing room. When Rachel arrived, Megan was there, and the scene made her laugh for the first time in weeks. A clothing rack held stunning dresses. A table was covered with a makeup arsenal, and on the coffee table sat 3 flutes and a bottle of champagne chilling. "Operation Phoenix is officially underway," Jessica announced, popping the cork with a festive crack. Megan hugged her tightly. "He's gonna eat his words, Rachel, and he'll regret it big time." The next few hours were a blend of therapy, celebration, and ritual. Over sips of champagne, they shared memories, laughed at old stories, and shed a few tears, not of sorrow, but of catharsis. Jessica, a makeup wizard, worked on Rachel's face like an artist with a blank canvas. Megan, with her flawless fashion sense, helped pick the perfect shoes and accessories. They weren't just applying makeup and choosing a dress. They were rescuing a friend. They were reminding Rachel who she was before she got lost in someone else's spotlight. With every stroke of mascara, every adjustment of the dress, the woman in the mirror transformed. The exhaustion gave way to radiance, the uncertainty to poise, the invisibility to a magnetic presence. When she was finally ready and looked in the mirror, her breath caught. The woman staring back was a version of herself she'd forgotten, but her heart recognized instantly. Strong, beautiful, with a fire in her eyes that wasn't anger, but pure, unyielding confidence. She was herself again, and she was ready to take the stage. The dress was the perfect weapon. A deep, sapphire silk gown Megan had insisted she try. Rachel hesitated at first. The color was bold, the cut revealing. But the moment the fabric slid over her skin, something shifted. It wasn't just a dress. It was armor and a statement. The rich, deep blue seemed to absorb and reflect the light, creating a glow that enveloped her. The one shoulder cut, with a masterful drape at the waist, didn't hide the body she'd spent the last 2 weeks reclaiming. It celebrated it. Every curve, once a source of shame under David's critical gaze, was now a line of strength and femininity. The dress hugged her with an elegance that was both powerful and subtle. Her hair, freed from its usual bun, cascaded over her shoulders in loose, glossy waves, the result of the deep conditioning and Jessica's skilled work with a curling iron. The movement of her hair felt alive, framing her face with a touch of untamed glamour. The makeup was a masterpiece. Jessica opted for a look that enhanced, not masked. A light foundation evened her skin tone, a soft contour sculpted her cheekbones, and a hint of highlighter on the high points made her glow. But the eyes were the star. Bronze and gold shadows made her hazel eyes blaze with feline intensity. Precise eyeliner and long lashes added depth and mystery. On her lips, a glossy, nude shade, inviting but clear that her eyes were the focus. When Jessica handed her a hand mirror, the world paused for a second. The woman staring back was both familiar and a revelation. It was her, but polished by confidence, refined by determination, and illuminated by a rediscovery of her own worth. The dark circles were gone, the tired expression replaced by powerful serenity. She stood and walked to the full-length mirror in Jessica's bedroom. The complete image took her breath away. She turned slowly, watching how the dress moved with her, how the light danced in her hair. For the first time in years, a warm, overwhelming feeling filled her, one she barely remembered. Pride. Pride not just in the reflection, but in the journey that brought her here. Pride in the resilience she didn't know she had. The strength she found in humiliation. She wasn't dressing up for David or the wedding guests. She was doing this for herself, for the woman she'd neglected for too long. Megan, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed and a satisfied smile, watched the scene. She saw the shift in Rachel's posture, the way she lifted her head, her shoulders relaxing back. "That's the woman you've always been, Rachel," Megan said, her voice soft but firm. "He didn't make you what you were. He just made you forget." Jessica approached, placing a comforting hand on Rachel's shoulder. "He wanted you invisible." What a colossal miscalculation. Rachel met her friend's eyes in the mirror. She saw love, unwavering support, and admiration. The tears that welled up now weren't of pain, but of overwhelming gratitude. She blinked them away, refusing to smudge Jessica's masterpiece. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "for reminding me." She took one last look in the mirror. The transformation was complete. It wasn't just the dress, the hair, or the makeup. It was the woman wearing them. The woman about to walk out the door wasn't a victim heading to a party where she'd be ignored. She was a queen ready to reclaim her throne. And she couldn't wait to see the look on the face of the man who thought he'd dethroned her forever. With Rachel transformed, the energy in Jessica's loft shifted to a frenzy of collective preparation. Megan, in a vibrant crimson gown that matched her fiery spirit, and Jessica, in an elegant emerald dress, got ready with the efficiency of a special ops team. The camaraderie was palpable, a symphony of zippers, jewelry clasps, and spritzes of perfume. They were three women, three friends, united by a purpose. When they were done, they stood together in front of the mirror, not just as individuals, but as a unified force. They were breathtaking. The wedding venue was an opulent ballroom in a downtown Seattle hotel, with crystal chandeliers casting golden light over the well-dressed crowd. The sound was a constant hum of chatter, laughter, and clinking glasses, the soundtrack of high society at play. David was already there, working the room with the ease of a host. He was in his element, a whiskey glass in hand, a charming smile on his face, accepting backslaps and handshakes. He was the picture of success, the charismatic entrepreneur everyone admired. He'd kept his part of the deal, arriving alone, projecting the image of a powerful, unattached man. Then the main ballroom doors opened. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, like a wave that starts quietly and swells, heads began to turn. The chatter didn't stop abruptly. It faltered, stumbled, then hushed in pockets as eyes were drawn to the entrance. There they were, three women walking side by side, Megan in her bold red, Jessica in her sophisticated green, and at the center the focal point of a masterpiece, Rachel. She moved with a calm and certainty that seemed to command the air around her. Chin up, eyes forward, a subtle, enigmatic smile on her lips. The sapphire gown flowed with hypnotic grace, catching the chandelier light and drawing every gaze. She didn't seem to be entering a party. She was claiming a kingdom. Flanking her, her friends weren't mere sidekicks but ladies-in-waiting to a queen, their presence amplifying the power of the central figure. The silence spread. Men stopped mid-sentence. Women lowered their glasses, eyes wide with surprise and reluctant admiration. Who was that woman? The question hung in the air even among those who knew her. They knew Rachel, David's wife, a pleasant but quiet figure who usually stayed in her husband's shadow at social events. The woman striding through the ballroom wasn't her. She was someone new, magnetic, unforgettable. Across the room, in the middle of a group of tech moguls, David was laughing at a joke. He sensed the shift in the atmosphere, the sudden drop in conversation volume. Curious, he turned to see what caused the stir. And then he saw her. The whiskey glass froze inches from his mouth. His smile didn't fade. It shattered like thin glass. His eyes widened, disbelief giving way to a deep, visceral shock. He blinked, certain his mind was playing tricks. But the image persisted. This wasn't the frumpy wife he'd left at home, the woman in grey sweats he'd ordered to pretend she didn't know him. The woman crossing the ballroom was a vision, a goddess commanding the room with her mere presence. And for a terrifying, dizzying moment, time seemed to rewind. He didn't see the woman he'd humiliated 2 weeks ago. He saw the Rachel he'd met years ago. The ambitious, vibrant professional whose intelligence and beauty had captivated him, the woman he'd worked so hard to win, the woman he'd somehow lost and forgotten existed. The blood drained from his face. The order he'd given her, "Pretend you don't know me," now felt like a curse he'd cast on himself. Because in that moment, watching this stunning woman everyone admired, part of him desperately wanted everyone to know she was his. But his own cruel decree stopped him. He was trapped, forced to watch, powerless, as the woman he'd tried to erase became the center of everyone's universe. Ignoring the shockwave her entrance caused, Rachel and her friends crossed the ballroom with clear purpose. They didn't pause for small talk or scan for familiar faces. Their destination was a well-placed round table, deliberately far from David's circle. It was an intentional choice, an ironic nod to his orders. Rachel sat with her back to where her husband stood, a subtle but unmistakable gesture. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't seek him out. For all intents and purposes, David Thompson didn't exist in her world. Her indifference was a masterpiece, sharper than any direct confrontation. Across the ballroom, David was frozen. The initial shock gave way to a storm of conflicting emotions: anger, confusion, and to his surprise, a primal, burning jealousy. How dare she? How dare she show up so magnificent? And how dare she obey him so perfectly, ignoring him with a coldness that made him feel like a complete stranger? He wavered, torn. Should he go to her, break his own rule and claim her, or stick to the charade, which meant watching from afar as other men inevitably noticed her? Each second of his hesitation stretched like an eternity. While David faltered, the moment slipped away. A man stepped away from a nearby table and approached Rachel with confidence. It was Mark, a friend of the groom, known for his charm and quiet sincerity. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a genuine smile that reached his eyes, he stopped by Rachel's table, addressing her with a respect she hadn't felt in years. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm and warm. "I know you just arrived, but the music's perfect, and I'd be a fool not to ask the most stunning woman here to dance." Jessica and Megan exchanged a knowing glance over their glasses. Rachel felt a flush rise up her neck, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was the warmth of being seen, being admired. She looked up at Mark and gave him a genuine smile. "I'd love to," she replied, her voice soft. Mark offered his hand, and Rachel took it. As he led her to the dance floor, a murmur rippled through the nearby tables. Across the room, David watched the scene like a slow-motion punch to the gut. Not only was she accepting another man's invitation, but she did so with a grace and joy that completely excluded him. On the dance floor, Mark was a gentleman. He held her firmly but gently, guiding her to the slow, romantic melody. For a moment, Rachel felt nervous, out of practice, but then she relaxed into his arms, letting herself feel the music and his pleasant presence. "I have to be honest," Mark said, his voice low so only she could hear. "When you walked through that door, the whole room stopped. Everyone was looking at you. You're breathtaking, by far the most beautiful woman here." His words hit her in a way she didn't expect. It wasn't a cheap flirt. It was a sincere observation spoken with admiration. It was the kind of thing David hadn't said in years. Coming from a kind, handsome stranger, the compliment carried even more weight. It was external validation that the woman she'd reclaimed was real, not just a mirror's illusion. Meanwhile, at David's table, friends who knew about his marriage began whispering, casting confused glances between the dance floor and his ashen face. "That's Rachel," one asked, incredulous. "Wow, David, what the hell? He was hiding her. That's insane," another said, louder than intended. "And now Mark, who doesn't waste time, is out there dancing with her, and he's just standing there. What a weird situation." Each word was salt in David's open wound. His face flushed with furious red. The humiliation he'd planned for her was backfiring, hitting him full force. He was no longer the powerful entrepreneur in control. He was the foolish husband, sidelined, while his stunning wife danced in another man's arms, becoming the center of attention and gossip. The jealousy and anger blinded him. His hesitation ended. He wasn't going to watch this spectacle anymore. He was going to stop it. The snap in David's mind was audible. The toxic mix of jealousy, wounded pride, and the public humiliation of his friends' whispers made his self-control evaporate. The sight of Rachel smiling at Mark, secure and admired in his arms, was the final spark in his powder keg of rage. He wasn't thinking anymore. He was reacting, driven by a possessive instinct he didn't know he had so fiercely. With blind determination, he slammed his whiskey glass on the table, the liquid splashing. Ignoring his friend's startled looks, he stormed across the ballroom. He didn't weave around tables or apologize for bumping into people. He marched straight, a predator with a fixed target, each step echoing in the hush following him. The romantic music still played, now an ironic soundtrack to the drama about to unfold. On the dance floor, Rachel was laughing at something Mark said, feeling a lightness she hadn't known in years. Suddenly, a hand clamped onto her arm like iron. The force was so abrupt, it yanked her from Mark's hold, making her stumble. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" David's voice was a low, dangerous growl. unrecognizable. Rachel stared at him, shocked, her face pale. Mark, surprised, stepped forward. "Hey man, what's your problem?" "The problem's not with you," David spat, not even glancing at him, his eyes locked on Rachel, burning with rage. "We're leaving. Now." He pulled her by the arm, starting to drag her off the dance floor. The music stopped abruptly. The ballroom, once watching with curiosity, now stared in stunned silence as the scene exploded. The scandal was public, undeniable. "Let go, David. You're hurting me." Rachel tried to wrench free, humiliation burning her face. Being ignored was one thing. Being treated like property and dragged out of a party in front of hundreds was another. He didn't release her. He kept pulling her through the opulent ballroom, past tables of gaping guests. Jessica and Megan stood ready to intervene, but his speed toward the exit was relentless. In seconds, they were outside in the cool night air, and he shoved her toward the parking lot. The car door was yanked open. Inside, the tense silence broke with his explosion. "You humiliated me!" he roared, slamming his fist on the steering wheel. The sound echoed in the confined luxury car. "In front of everyone, my friends, my contacts, dancing with that idiot, showing off like some—" The tears Rachel had held back for weeks finally came, but not from sadness. They were from rage. The adrenaline of the scene, the pain in her arm, the injustice of his accusation. It all erupted in an unstoppable wave. "Humiliated who?" she fired back, her voice tearing from her throat. "Me? I just existed. I breathed, I smiled, I danced. Things I haven't done in years because I was too busy making your life perfect. Shame? Shame is having a husband who hides a wedding invitation because he's embarrassed of the woman who gave up her career for him." Her accusation hit him, but he was too blinded by anger to absorb it. The argument raged the entire drive home, a venomous exchange filling every inch of the car. In the apartment, the fight escalated. It wasn't just about the party anymore. It was about everything. Old wounds, buried resentments, years of unrecognized sacrifices, and unacknowledged selfishness were laid bare. "I erased myself for you, David," she screamed, tears streaming freely. "I became a shadow so you could shine brighter. I managed your life, the company, while mine disappeared. And what was my reward? Being called frumpy and dull by the man I helped build." "I never asked you to do any of that," he lied, cornered. "You did. You said I was the best person to help you, and because I loved you and believed in us, I agreed, and you let me. You took everything I gave and never looked back to see what I was losing," she sobbed, her chest aching with the truth of her words. In that moment, amid the shouts and tears, a final clarity hit her. The party wasn't the problem, it was the diagnosis. The marriage wasn't sick, it was dead, and she'd been trying to revive a corpse for too long. "That party," she said, her voice suddenly calm, exhausted. "That party woke me up. I saw what you think of me, and I saw who I can be without you." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. David stared at her, perhaps seeing the depth of the chasm between them for the first time. But it was too late. The period had been placed. Without another word, Rachel went to the guest room. She didn't pack much, just a bag, her documents, phone, and keys. She passed him in the living room where he stood motionless, stunned. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice weak. "To Jessica's," she replied, not looking at him. "It's over, David." And with that, she opened the door and left, leaving behind the apartment, the marriage, and the man who, in trying to erase her, had ignited the flame that set her free. The days following the wedding were a blur of painful clarity for Rachel and mounting panic for David. Staying at Jessica's loft, surrounded by her friends' unwavering support, Rachel felt the weight of years of unhappiness begin to lift, replaced by a quiet determination. She didn't cry anymore. The storm had passed, leaving a resolute calm. David, meanwhile, was unraveling. The first day without Rachel was eerily quiet. By the second, chaos crept in. He couldn't find critical documents, missed bill payments, didn't know the social calendar she'd always managed. The house was a mess. The invisible machinery that kept his life and company running smoothly had been removed, and the machine began to break down. Then the calls and texts started. At first, apologies. "Rachel, I'm so sorry. I was an idiot." I lost my head. She read the messages, listened to the voicemails, but felt an emptiness where love should have been. His words rang hollow, rehearsed. Then the tone shifted. Rachel, I need that audit spreadsheet. Where did you file it? Or, I can't find the vendor notes anywhere, please help me out. That's when it clicked. David's panic wasn't about losing his wife. It was about losing his unpaid administrator. He didn't miss her. He missed what she did for him. He was lost, asking for help, not forgiveness. The realization was liberating. She agreed to meet him, not at home, but at a neutral law office. When he saw her, he tried one last time. We can fix this, babe. I messed up. I know. Rachel looked at him not with anger, but with a distant compassion, like looking at an old business partner. David, I'll help you organize the transition. I'll show you where the files are and give you the vendor contacts. But the marriage? No. There's nothing to fix. She kept her word. For a few weeks, she acted with the professionalism that defined her old career, organizing the handover of her responsibilities to keep the company she'd helped build from collapsing. But she made it clear it was a temporary service with an expiration date, and the price was her freedom. The divorce negotiations were surprisingly civil, largely because David knew he was on shaky ground. With a sharp lawyer, Rachel ensured her contribution to the business was recognized. It wasn't alimony, it was her rightful share as a co-founder. She walked away with a substantial sum reflecting her years of unseen labor and sacrifice. The day they signed the final papers, she felt no sadness, only the relief of closing a chapter. Free and with significant capital, Rachel felt the world open up again. She rented a bright, stylish loft in Fremont, a space that was hers alone, decorated to her taste, free of past shadows. But her biggest investment was in herself. She updated her resume, reactivated her professional network, and, with newfound confidence, started job hunting. It didn't take long. Her track record, combined with the vibrant energy she now radiated, was irresistible. A major competitor to her old firm hired her as a senior director. Returning to the corporate world felt like coming home. The adrenaline of meetings, the challenge of leading a team, the satisfaction of a successful project, it all came rushing back. She thrived. Within months, she wasn't just another director. She was a rising star. She earned her boss's respect and her team's loyalty. Her name became synonymous with competence and innovation. Looking back, she realized the truth. Her light hadn't gone out. It wasn't lost or extinguished. It had been smothered under the weight of expectations and the invisibility of her marriage. Now, free from that shadow, it shone brighter than ever, and the light was all hers. Months passed, shifting the seasons and Rachel's life in ways she never imagined possible. The woman who once felt invisible in her own home now walked Seattle's streets with renewed purpose, her posture tall, her eyes bright. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and Rachel was exactly where she belonged, at a charming cafe in Pike Place Market, sunlight filtering through the trees, laughing with Jessica and Megan. Their friendship, her lifeline, was now the safe harbor where she celebrated her victories. They talked about work, weekend plans, life in all its glorious normalcy. As Megan recounted a hilarious story about a disastrous date, the cafe door opened and a man walked in. He paused, his eyes adjusting to the light, then locked with Rachel's. The recognition was instant for both. It was Mark, the man from the dance, the gentleman at the wedding that became the epicenter of her life's earthquake. He hesitated for a second, then a warm, genuine smile spread across his face. He approached their table. Jessica and Megan fell silent, exchanging a look of surprise and complicity. "Rachel," he said, his voice as pleasant as she remembered, "I was hoping I'd run into you again." Rachel felt her heart give a gentle leap, but this time it was a feeling of pleasure, not anxiety. Mark, what a coincidence. He nodded politely to Jessica and Megan before turning back to Rachel. There was a sincerity in his gaze that disarmed her. "I have to say," he began, his voice softer, "I've never forgotten you since that night. The image of you walking into that ballroom, it's burned into my memory." He paused, choosing his words carefully. But I didn't reach out. I heard you were married, heard about the drama, and the last thing I wanted was to complicate things or cause trouble. He looked her over, not with David's critical judgment, but with palpable admiration. Anyway, he continued, you look different. If it's even possible, you're more beautiful now. There's a light in you. Rachel felt a genuine warmth in her chest. The compliment wasn't about the dress or makeup. It was about her, the essence he saw. She smiled, a wide, confident smile born of her hard-won self-assurance. Thank you, Mark. And well, she said, her voice clear and steady. I'm divorced. And I'm good. Better than ever. Mark's face lit up, his cautious respect giving way to visible relief and joy he didn't try to hide. He laughed, a light, infectious sound. I have to admit, that's the best news I could have heard, he said, no pretense. His gaze grew more direct, more intense. In that case, can I take you to dinner tonight? The invitation hung in the air, full of promise. Rachel glanced at her friends, who gave her a nearly imperceptible nod of encouragement. She turned back to Mark. I'd love that. That night, as Rachel walked into the upscale restaurant he'd chosen, she felt like a completely different person from the woman who prepared for the wedding months ago. The transformation wasn't armor for a battle anymore. It was simply her skin. She wore a simple, elegant black dress that spoke of confidence, not defiance. Mark was already there, at a table by a window overlooking the city lights. He stood as she approached, his expression one of pure, unwavering admiration. There were no games, no conditions, no shadows of the past. Just a man seeing a woman he genuinely admired. As he pulled out her chair and she sat, Rachel understood with crystal clarity. This wasn't just a dinner. It wasn't about proving a point or seeking validation. It was a new beginning, one she hadn't been looking for but one she deserved. A beginning with someone who saw her, from the very first moment, for exactly who she was. A strong, complete, radiant woman, ready for the next chapter of her own extraordinary story. And so, under Seattle's city lights, Rachel didn't just find new love, but the confirmation that the most important person to rediscover was herself. Her story is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to reclaim your own light, even when others try to convince you it's gone out. And if this story moved you and you believe more people need to hear this message, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss any of our upcoming inspiring stories. A big hug, and until next time.